I don't think it's fair to biologically born women. I think that is just factual. It has taken so long to get women's sports to be taken even a little seriously, and this just feels like a slap in the face.
If a person is a man, but believes at their core they are a woman, they should not be allowed to compete in women's divisions due to an unfair advantage and making women uncomfortable in the locker room.
We put this video together for our friends and family to encourage them to stop worrying about trans women in sports and start worrying about fascism. We understand their concerns, but it's important to talk about how these anxieties reflect rhetoric and global fascistic movements. Over the last decade, movements against gender ideology have been surging in countries across the globe, including the United States, Poland, France, Spain, Russia, India, Argentina, South Korea, and China. But what even is this phantasm, as Judith Butler calls it, that has found a foothold in so many distinct cultural and political landscapes? Apparently, gender ideology can be anything from women's bodily autonomy to gay marriage to gender-affirming care for transgender youth. You name it. If it has to do with bodies or sex existing in any way outside of patriarchal norms, it's probably gender ideology. That's what makes this phantasm so powerful and dangerous. It's vague enough that it can harness the very real, specific anxieties in any country or region which oftentimes emerge from political, economic, or environmental instability and turn them on women, or gay people, or trans people, or gender studies professors, people who are supposedly indoctrinating everyone's children into their cult of gender ideology and taking over the world. If the current proliferation of the anti-gender ideology movement begins in any one place, it is in the moment that Pope Benedict picks up American Catholic journalist Dale O'Leary's 1997 book, The Gender Agenda, which she wrote after attending the 1995 United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. This book lays out how, quote, the gender establishment firmly controls the UN. Pope Benedict latched onto this, and thus began the wave of anti-gender policies and rhetoric that is still sweeping the world today. A quick refresher for those who are not as familiar with the rhetoric of the Catholic Church. There is deep investment in the patriarchal family as a divine ordinance. Gender as separate from sex is, quote, man's attempt at self-emancipation from creation and the Creator. The Catholic Church is also, of course, big on displacing their own history of child abuse, and gay people have ended up being a prime target for this. As Butler says, the, quote, caricature of gay and lesbian people, including their supportive parents or their queer parents, as doing harm to children is a projection and disavowal of the brutal sexual exploitation of children conducted by the Catholic Church. Even Pope Francis, who's managed to achieve the reputation of a more liberal pope, is still heavily invested in preserving the, quote, natural family. Equating gender with nuclear war, he says, let's think of nuclear arms, of the possibility to annihilate in a few instants a very high number of human beings. Let's think also of genetic manipulation, of the manipulation of life, or of the gender theory that does not recognize the order of creation. But make no mistake, the anxieties about the corrupting influence of gender ideology exceed far beyond the bounds of the Catholic Church and have firmly taken root in secular, far-right, and even fascistic movements on the right as well as the left all around the world. In the U.S. right now, anti-gender activists have decided to focus on women's sports.
Joe Biden and the Democrats are even pushing policies that would destroy women's sports. A lot of new records are being broken in women's sports. Hate to say that, ladies, but got a lot of new records. They're being shattered. You know, for years, the weightlifting, every ounce is like a big deal for many years. All of a sudden, somebody comes along and beats it by 100 pounds. Boom, boom. Now, young girls and women are incensed that they are now being forced to compete against those who are biological males. It's not good for women. It's not good for women's sports, which worked so long and so hard to get to where they are.
Hi everyone, this is Congresswoman Green. Tune in at 1 o'clock today to speaker.gov/live. We're going to be celebrating and discussing girls and women's sports. We have the men invading our sports. They're invading our locker rooms, our playing fields, and our traditions. It's time to throw the boys and the men out. You'll hear from real panels where female athletes will be discussing the trials, the tribulations, the invasion of privacy, and the sheer disrespect of men who want to pretend like they're women.
Women's sports are threatened across the entire country. Some women are being forced to play against biological men like Riley and Paula were. Women's college athletic teams are threatened. College records that women set are threatened. Women's sports, women's records, women's teams, women's locker rooms, all are jeopardized when biological men are allowed to compete for those titles, for those teams.
These are the same people who you likely voted against. This is Governor Greg Abbott, who signed bills to allow concealed carry weapons on college campuses, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who believes that, quote, Democrats are a party of pedophiles. Many well-meaning people, maybe even you, dear listener, believe that trans women joining sports just isn't right. We interviewed friends and family members about the participation of trans women and girls in sports. Their answers mimicked much of the far-right rhetoric. But what makes someone a man or a woman? Their outside appearance? Their chromosomes? Performance? Testosterone levels? All of those questions and debates emerge when we need to define the binary in a sphere such as sports. When looking at the different criteria that have been used in the past with the International Olympic Committee and the World Athletics Federation, it becomes evident that maybe the lines between male and female aren't as clear as society wants them to be. Testosterone is not the only thing that is important for an individual's athletic performance. We can cite the maximal oxygen consumption, the heart size, the nutrition, the coaching, and the equipment. All athletes' bodies are different, and not all athletes benefit from the same environment and tools to train. Consider Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all time with a total of 28 medals for his swimming performances. Phelps can be considered naturally talented at this sport due to his height, long torso, and wide feet that make it easy for him to move quickly underwater. What is more, it is complicated to define a normal level of testosterone. It varies throughout the day, with age, according to the time of year, and within the menstrual cycle. Now, think about the kind of people who are often suspected of not meeting the Olympic standards in terms of gender categorization. They are often women of color who are judged based on their physical appearance. The Olympic Committee has previously required nude parades, chromosome testing, and testosterone level testing in order to prove or disprove a person's status as a biological woman. All of these, however, prove futile, and the Olympic Committee has given up sex testing entirely. We can think of Caster Semenya, the South African middle-distance runner whose gender was questioned by sports authorities and who was forced to undergo testing using the sole criteria of testosterone. Semenya's naturally occurring testosterone was deemed too high, even though not a single study has shown that naturally occurring high testosterone levels affect athletic performance. Although sex testing is no longer required by the IOC, history repeated itself at the Paris 24 Olympics when the Algerian boxer Imane Khalef was considered too good to be a woman and was then the subject of numerous debates, notably by far-right public figures. But if you look at some of the more successful white female athletes, like Katie Ledecky, there is no question that she is a woman, despite her clear biological advantages. Why is it that some biological advantages call into question a person's sex and others do not? Donald Trump, the Catholic Church, and the Olympic Committee all share similar anxieties about the messiness of sex and gender. Do you really want to be caught up in the same anti-gender ideology rhetoric that is catalyzing global fascistic movements? Does it really make sense to try and keep trans women out of sports when the task of deciding what a biological woman is so difficult and fraught with racism? What if instead we focused on ways to make sports a liberatory space for every person, regardless of their gender identity?